Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CLI's Legalpreneurs Spotlight Future 50 series. In this series, we're showcasing thought leaders and doers in legal innovation and legal tech all around the world. Today, I'm joined by Pablo Arredondo, a co-founder and the Chief Innovation Officer at CaseText. Hi, Pablo. Pablo is a serial entrepreneur with a deep history in legal informatics. He's a fellow at the Stanford Center for Legal Informatics. At CaseText, he's leading and involved in some really amazing things, and we're going to touch on some of those today. Our topic today is neural nets and their application in the legal ecosystem. Now, if this already sounds too out there for you, it's not. It's part of the legal world right now, so hang in. I promise you're going to enjoy this one. Pablo, I am so looking forward to this discussion. It's crazy. A huge welcome to CLI and to this series. It's absolutely fabulous to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Terry.
A pleasure. I wanted to kind of take folks in the first question on a bit of a journey. I'm sure the journey that you and your company CaseText have taken, and it's kind of a journey in many respects that all of us are taking, I guess. And so I'm going to jump in with some foundational stuff first and then get to the practical applications in the legal world of the sort of work that you're doing. So the obvious first question is this one. What are neural nets? And into that, I'm going to ask you, can you throw in some definitions along the way for AI and machine learning and natural language processing as well, please?
Sure, absolutely. So neural nets are something that sounds very, very either futuristic or certainly very recent.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, but actually has roots that go very far back. As far back as the 1940s.
Wow.
There were folks that sort of looked at the neurons, or biological neurons, and saw in them something that was not unlike a logic gate, something that sort of fired with values, and thought there might be a way to sort of approximate that. And decades later, you had the earliest days of the field of artificial intelligence, which was actually coined at a conference at Dartmouth, I think in the 60s, maybe the like mid 50s. I'm blanking on it right now. And they thought they were going to solve all of it right then at that conference, which didn't happen. And from the earliest days of the artificial intelligence, there were these two schools of thought about how do you make something intelligent. One school of thought said, look, humans are intelligent. We know how to think about things. Why don't we teach the machine how to think about things? And that's been called different things, the symbolic system, expert systems, right? And but there was another school of thought that said, hold on, you're right about that we are smart, but what's actually smart? It's this very strange thing in our heads here, right? And these things in our heads have no flowcharts or outlines, etc. What they have is this amazing constellation of neurons that have been manicured over time through experience to connect each other in just certain ways. And so if you want to make something smart, we should sort of mimic what the smart thing does, sort of mimic the brain. And it's important not to overstate that, right? It's loosely inspired by neurobiology, but they certainly weren't going out to build brains. And certainly, neural nets in its modern sense is not that at all. But the idea with neural nets, and this sort of gets into machine learning as well, is let the machine teach itself. Let it pick up its own rules. And the way you do that is you say, give it goals. You say, this is what you're trying to achieve. And you essentially let it do a very sort of sublime mathematical form of trial and error, right? And just doing that alone. And in the early days, the truth is the neural net folks had a tough go of things, right? They were kind of, I don't want to say laughed out of the room, but they were kind of told you're wasting your career. And part of the issue was that to test those theories, you actually need quite powerful computers.
Yeah.
Much more powerful than the kind that existed back when they were first kind of looking at these. So what you've had recently over the last decade and a half or so is this resurgence really of these theories that again are old, but what's really new is that now we have the computational power to really try them out and to really test them. And so much of what's been going on with AI, so much of the stuff, the real progress has been driven because of these neural nets. Which gets me to the last part of what you talked about, which was natural language processing. So natural language processing is essentially the study of how do computers interact with language. And from the earliest days, again, of artificial intelligence, language was one of the things they wanted to get a computer to be able to work with and understand. So natural language processing is essentially that subfield.
Mm.
And there's different ways to kind of date the field. With the world wars, there was suddenly a big interest in translation, which kind of got people kind of thinking about language and think that, how do we kind of quickly tell what somebody else is saying in different language? And largely it was rules based. It was expert based, right? You would go and do the hard work of kind of mapping out sentences and what they mean. But what has happened recently, and really why I'm here in a sense, is to report the very good news that we've been able to bring the neural net approach and apply it to language. And the resulting technology is something that is, I think, poised to have an immediate and profound impact on the legal profession. And I don't use either of those words lightly.
Yeah, absolutely. Being a profession that is so fundamentally based in language, I guess, right?
Exactly.
So let me just try to bring that back to its absolute basics. What we're effectively saying is that this is about programming and I guess coding to recognize patterns in data. Is that a reasonable, really, I appreciate, really simplistic way of expressing it, but is that at the core of it, or is it something different from that?
No, I think, whenever you get into recognizing patterns, that's always a good bet, because most things, like the work in computational law.
I'm safe, yay!
No. I mean, no, but it's true. But essentially, one way to think about it is, how do we encode language? How do we actually store it and keep it?
Yeah.
And what was the traditional way we did that since we digitized cases, for instance, which was a pretty big deal, right? To go from paper to computers, right? The way it was stored was in a spreadsheet, a big spreadsheet that had each word in your vocabulary got a row and each document got a column. And you sort of said, is there something there or not? And that enabled some very powerful things. I could now search through 1 million cases looking for a certain word, right? Or even like one word within 10 words of another, right? But the issue there, though, is that you were at the mercy of your keyword. You had to guess the right word. And the way language was encoded, the way it's been encoded for so long, you basically always had to guess the right words. And we came up with various ways to work around that with Boolean searching, right? And lawyers sort of pride themselves on how they can construct these long queries with, parentheses and all sorts of, exclamation points to expand words and things like that. But all the studies that have looked at it have found the same thing, which is that searching with keyword has two main problems. First, you bring in things you didn't want, but they happen to have that keyword.
Yeah.
And second, you miss things you did want, things that didn't have your keyword, but did contain the concepts that you care about. And that's where neural nets are bringing so many gains.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit how case text in a way has developed their journey on that. And I'm talking about, say, keyword searches versus something more, because I know you're going to tell us about the something more. And I guess particularly, your product, All Search, because it's doing some amazing things, but it's also very much demonstrating exactly what you were just saying, how neural nets are really being applied quite differently. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So, Case Text, we were founded back in 2013, before a lot of these big breakthroughs happened. And we spent a lot of time, building a sort of nuts and bolts legal research tool. And, as all the common law systems know, one of the issues with common law is that one case can overrule another case. So we were sort of on our way. We were building traditional search engine, Boolean, all of these things. But one of the things we had to do is make sure that we alerted attorneys if one case overruled another. Now, the process of doing that, the truth is, sometimes the judge will be very kind of generous about it and say, we now overruled Jenkins. Lovely, wonderful, parsable. But sometimes judges will, use their authority and say, we regretfully resign Jenkins to the dustbin of oblivion, or something like that. And this is their right to speak how they'd like. And I don't mind a little. If I'm going to be governed by a corpus of documents, I want a little poetry in there.
Absolutely.
And so, but that presents a challenge, right? Because now, how do you go and find, those instances where you can't just get the right keyword? And one approach is sort of a brute force approach, which is what, large companies like Thomson Reuters were able to do. Just put so many people on it that you can just go through it all. And make no mistake, people do need to be involved in this, right?
Sure.
But what you can do, we had a lot of evolutionary pressure on us, if you will, to figure out ways that we could be more efficient without a drop in quality. And that's sort of the beginning of how machine learning began to enter into our picture, was seeing these ways where we would train it with a lot of examples. And then suddenly, there were these light flickers where you'd say, wait, hold on. It knows that that's overruling. That's not how you would normally say it. And then just as the timing was, there were these big breakthroughs. And so we were kind of well positioned to both see this wave coming and then to kind of get ready to surf it. And that's really what we've been doing now, is really leaning all in to the enormous amount of power that's now being opened up because these neural nets are being applied to language.
Yeah, really, really just phenomenal. You mentioned the word train, and we often hear this in relation to the sort of work that you're doing, that, things can train themselves, neural nets can train themselves. What does that really mean?
Okay, great question. So, let me do it in the context of language, and we'll get right into sort of like the main one. Although, it might be easier to talk about chess in the beginning, but let's just jump right into it.
Go for it.
Right. So, what it means is, say, take a random neural net. So think of it as just sort of a bunch of randomly configured things, right? And we don't need to get too into the details, right? And what you do is you actually make it play a simple game. So if I say to you, the man went to the store to buy a blank of milk, what word did I hide there? What word comes to your
bottle.
mind?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Pint,
Yeah.
You didn't say zebra, right? You didn't say, roller coaster, right? What you just did there very effortlessly was hear that sentence, think not just what do all these words mean by themselves, but what do these words mean in this order? And then you went a further step and you said, of all these words, when they're in this order, which one is the most useful for guessing the missing word? Because if I had said the woman went to the store to buy a blank of milk, same answer. But if I had said the man went to the store to buy a blank of beer, maybe that changes. All of those things were effortless for you, but they actually required a lot of sort of linguistic kind of dexterity. I did ironic that I'm using such a poor phrase for it, right? So, but basically you had to really sort of have a deeper understanding of language to do that so effortlessly. So believe it or not, it really, the bulk of it is as simple as taking this random neural net and you say, play that game. And the first time it plays, it says, the man went to the store to buy a roller coaster of milk. Hey, how'd I do? And it says, I did very badly, didn't I? And the thing, what's amazing is we don't have to tell it. It's already coded what the answer sheet is. So it can just look without us doing anything. And what it says is, boy, that was a terrible answer. If I nudged myself just a little bit this way, if I reconfigured myself just a touch this way, I would have done less horrible. And you make it play that game over and over and over on specialized chips. We fed the entire common law through it. It had to guess those missing words, but the entire common law. It's a truly, massive amount of computational power that goes into it. And for reasons we don't fully understand, in getting really good at this game, the neural net starts to kind of configure language in such a way that now these relationships, these things that seem like surely only a human would know that these two things mean the same thing, it starts to capture that, right? Does it understand language? No, it doesn't understand language the way a human is, but it acts like it does.
Yes.
And that goes a long way in when your search engine can act like it does, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost understanding the context more than the words in a way, isn't it? And that's
exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just quite amazing. We've touched on keyword searches and obviously the application of neural net architectures or frameworks, I guess. Do you think between keyword searches and using the sort of applications that you've developed using a neural net, is it a matter of choosing between one or the other because one is more accurate than the other, or is it a matter of choosing it all? Or if you do you choose on the basis of understanding what each can do and just kind of using the right tool for the right task? I mean, how do you start thinking about that in a way?
So years ago, I saw a New Yorker cartoon that stuck with me where the man standing in front of his microwave and angrily saying, "No, I don't want to play chess. I just want you to reheat the lasagna," right? And to my mind, there are certainly information needs. What you need to do is say, what do I need and what will serve me best, right?
Yeah.
We absolutely left in case text the ability to run a Boolean search or a normal keyword search.
Yeah. Okay.
There are times where that is, for whatever your need, is the best thing to do.
Mm.
And in fact, we also enabled the ability to have a hybrid where you say,
Okay.
here's a sentence. I need this particular phrase to be there,
Yeah.
but the rest of it, just bring me what's conceptually related.
Yeah.
And that actually touches on something I don't think I laid out before, which is another benefit of these neural nets. It's not just that they're now able to bring you relevant matches, even if there's no overlap.
Mm.
Because of the way they were trained, and we all know now the kind of school they went to, they can take sentences as their full input.
Amazing.
For the first time, you can take an actual sentence exactly as you would have it in your brief. You can even leave the party names in. And it's able to look at it exactly like you said, the context. What does this sentence as a whole mean? And bring back relevant things. So you have at once a new type of query and a completely new level of relevance in what it's able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to, if I can, just expand on that and get you to maybe give us a couple of examples. So where would you, for example, use a keyword search versus a neural net application, if you like?
Absolutely. So let's say, and I'll go to e-discovery for the moment,
Sure.
right? So, I mean, as we'll get in with all search, we're pointing this thing at everything. So,
Of course.
there are certain points in e-discovery where I need to see all the communications from Frank Reynolds, right? Or something like that, right? Or all the references to a certain deal thing, because I just want to know comprehensively that I've seen everything that does that. But there are other instances where, there's a specific element that you're trying to show. They were concerned that the merger would lower the share price, right? And there, you could do share price, but good luck. You're going to get, you're going to get the phone book, right? You could try a bunch of merger concern. That's a place where that longer kind of like more granular kind of need, where there are so many ways to say it. That's where a neural net is just absolutely invaluable, and nothing else comes very close, to be honest.
Yeah. And I guess also so many places where just that keyword could be connected that you would end up with just a ridiculous number of returns, right, on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're searching deposition transcripts and you say, when did the negotiations with Walgreens begin? Well, if they happen to have said it as, when did you first start discussions with Walgreens? A neural net will return that first.
Yes.
Keyword search would say, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no negotiation within sentence of first, right?
Yes.
So it really does depend on it. But you don't lose the Boolean. You keep that in your tool belt. We are seeing increasingly folks loving to use the neural net search generally for more and more things.
Yeah, because I can see that it would refine those searches significantly more than pretty much anything else, right? Yeah.
No, it is. For those of us who have spent so long using traditional tools, it's quite striking when you see suddenly that it can bring up all of these completely different articulations of the same thing.
Just amazing. I want to put all the technical bits to one side for a question, or this next question for a second, and ask you this. Does this sort of AI kind of have other advantages? And what I'm thinking about here is, does it provide new ways to connect with clients or provide new products for them to use, and I guess even new ways to collaborate in a way? Have you seen that work, and could you give us an example of that?
Yeah, so I mean, one early example, we had one client firm whose clients had amassed over sort of decades a large amount of collective bargaining agreements, often written in a lot of different ways. And they sort of like, look, we don't know, we can't really search through these in any reliable way.
Yeah.
And so what this firm did is basically create a search engine for their clients. And now we get to sort of what all search is. Case text is all lit on neural nets. We absolutely believe that neural nets are going to have just an enormous amount of value will be created. And that starts with search engines. There's a lot of other things that we'll be talking about. Maybe later we can get into some of those. And so we created a way that anybody can point neural net search at anything they want. We're just sort of like, how do you say, like, because the truth is our clients, first they wanted it for e-discovery, then for, transcripts, and then somebody wanted it for their intranet. And so we sort of realized, look, why don't we just give you sort of a universal way to kind of stand up your own engine? Just put the documents in, they'll be ingested, they'll be converted into that sublime vector space that the neural net orients with all of its, wisdom from its game. And so absolutely, we've seen folks using it for client-facing things, sharing. There's like employment groups that are not just one attorney in one firm, but like everyone who does like the Texas Employment Lawyers Association. Well, they have a collective sort of brief bank that they kind of have, but nobody used it, I think, that's what they told me, because it's quite hard and cumbersome. Well, we put that into a neural net, right? And now it's much easier for people to find what they need.
Absolutely.
So it really is, it's a very flexible tool that, it brings value wherever language is found. And in law, you don't have to go far before you get
to. Yeah. So I have to share a personal story with you. The very last event that I went to in the States before the pandemic hit with gusto was the ABA Tech conference in Chicago. And I went to a demo that one of your colleagues was doing, and I listened to it, and I thought, this is absolutely amazing technology. So, I've been a fan for a long time, is what I'm saying. It was absolutely incredible. Pablo, I want to ask you this question, though, and it's getting kind of even, I guess, more into the nitty-gritty of all of this. There will be folks listening to us chat about this, and they're busy practitioners, they're time poor, and they're probably thinking, wow, this sounds really complicated. How am I ever going to get my head around all of this stuff? What words of encouragement would you give them, or what thoughts or words of wisdom, I guess, in a way, would you share with them?
Well, what I would say first and foremost is part of the power of this technology is how simple it can make it to use it. And what I mean by that is, there are plenty of partners we talk to who don't want to construct long Boolean queries, but they certainly know how to type a sentence and put that in, right? Yeah. And so part of it is as wonderfully complex as some of the underlying mathematics of AI is, right? What that enables, what can sit on top of that, is actually something that's much more intuitive. And in this, it's something different with this new generation of artificial intelligence than some of the things some folks may have encountered in previous decades, where it was incumbent on them to train the AI themselves and kind of do all these things, right? This new generation of AI sort of works out of the box and is just far more intuitive. And we've seen that, legal tech adoption is never easy. But here we've seen it kind of grow organically with people just going down the hall to tell somebody else about it. And again, because most attorneys know how to type in a sentence, they can use it. So I would tell attorneys who want to get into the weeds, or the roses, as I think, because I think they're fantastic.
Absolutely.
Please, know that that's there. Should you say, I just need to find what I need to find, and I don't, I have other pursuits that I'd go into to deep dive, no worries. Just come, type your sentence, find what you need, and you'll be equally getting the value out of it.
I'm sure that case text is all over this next question that I wanted to ask you, because it's part of your bread and butter. But what's next for neural nets? I mean, where can all of this go? I mean, in particular in the legal world, obviously.
Wow. So let me start by saying that the same breakthroughs that have enabled all search have also broken through certain barriers and walls that are now leading to an accelerating amount of progress.
Yeah.
Companies like, Google, OpenAI, Amazon, there's an enormous amount of work that's now being done leveraging these neural nets and certain architectures. We have a weekly meeting with the machine learning folks, and I, can tag along. It's co-founder privilege, right?
Yeah, and, absolutely.
And you'll see them discussing a paper that like builds and expands on a paper that just had come out the week before. Right? I mean, the rate of gains are truly staggering.
Yeah.
And what I think you're going to see is things that you might sort of say like, oh, that's incredible. That's not going to happen, right? There's just, there's limits, right? You might see like it's very possible that those limits are going to be exceeded in a lot of ways. And in terms of the impact to the law, so this is there's this sense of like, oh, AI is coming for my job.
Oh, yes.
Well, I would say, at least if used the way case text hopes to,
Mm,
it's not coming for your job. It's creating the job that you wanted when you went to become a lawyer, where
absolutely.
you were focused on the things that only humans can do. And there's still much that only humans can do.
Mm,
But, tedious, repetitive drafting tasks, or, having to iterate through a bunch of false positives that really weren't what you're looking for.
mm,
That's not really, that is part of your job right now. That certainly we're surrounded by it,
mm.
but that's not really, why you got into it.
Yeah.
So what I would hope to see is increasingly attorneys able to focus on the things that are human, and having a lot of the things that slow them down, that break their momentum, that frankly, depending on who you are, I mean, I got very demoralized by the bad technology. Maybe that's
Agreed.
why I took the path I did. Um, so, I would just say that the acceleration that you're seeing is really incredible.
Mm,
And, I expect, and Casetext believes that these neural nets are going to go even further than what they're doing right now, quite further, in fact.
yeah. But, Pablo, as you were speaking, I was thinking that, what you're talking about is a fundamental change in the way, not just how lawyers deliver what they do, but how they conceive it in the first place. And then, yes, of course, the tools that they use as well. So I wanted to wrap, and I don't really want to, because I could happily chat with you for a very long time. But with this question, how important is it for legal practitioners to start wrapping their heads around this stuff? I mean, do they have to do it today? Do they have 5 years? And I'm not asking that in terms of just the time frame, but more kind of pulling out some threads of what you've been talking about throughout this discussion, about how much things are changing and how quickly. And so if they're sitting here kind of looking at this thinking, wow, okay, I've got to get into this, do they need to do it now? And if they want to, where do they start on this journey, do you think?
Right. Well, in the states, increasingly number of states in America are now adding what they call a duty of technological competence
Yes.
to the responsibilities of an attorney.
Yes.
And truthfully, I don't think what they mean right now is you better be using transformer-based neural nets. Like that. I don't think that, like, if you went and pressed them on it. But if you look at it, and this is what lawyers often do, let's look at the policy reasons underneath that duty. Why is it that we have that duty? Well, because part of zealous advocacy, part of really doing best by your client, is where you can, using tools that make you more efficient, more effective, more likely to uncover not just a good case, but the best case.
Mm.
And on all of those dimensions, one of the things with these neural nets, there's normally sort of a tension between I'm more efficient versus I'm quality, right? The paradigm shift that's happening with neural nets and the what they call the large language models that they're creating are such that you're really seeing explosive gains on both, right?
Mm.
And so I would say that attorneys should feel some urgency, not necessarily to dive into the inner workings of neural nets and things like that, but to try out tools that are leveraging these this underlying technology, be it case text or others, as they come across them, and really see, is this making me a much more effective at what I'm doing? And by the way, it also makes life a lot better too. I mean, that's something that, it's funny, we talked about kind of law firms and their incentives and things, and somebody said associate happiness is something that's now considered. And I was like, oh, that's new. That wasn't when, okay, that's a new thing that's now being considered. But the truth is, bad technology is draining. And
Yeah.
so it's not just the quality and the efficiency, although that's there. You'll also, I think, just enjoy your practice a lot more increasingly as you leverage this technology.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating and exciting almost all at the same time. I just think it's incredible. It's incredible the work that you're doing. And folks, do check out Casetext. It is amazing. Pablo, thank you so much for your time today. I've so enjoyed this discussion, and I'm kind of looking forward to having another one at another time, because I know there'll be plenty more to chat about.
Absolutely. And let me leave on one last plug, actually, not for Casetext, but just to show sort of further examples of neural nets. OpenAI, the company that I referenced, has a tool out called Dolly that will let you sort of type in any fun picture you want, or crazy picture. For my daughter, it's like a unicorn jumping over a rainbow with a zebra, and a neural net will take whatever you type and generate it, often with ways you could say, now make it watercolor. So just to point out that the neural nets, we're using them in law, you're going to see them being used in other places as well. So maybe that gets to even more incentive to really start to kind of pay attention to them, because they are coming to help across a large range of activities.
Absolutely. But also your daughter is using them. So in other words, by the time that she gets to, for example, if she decides to become a lawyer, I mean, that's going to be a phenomenal change in her familiarity and expectation in terms of that role as well, right?
It's true. I mean, she's been bossing Alexa around, trying to override what we say since she was 2 years old. So I think, it probably will be second nature to engage. Carrie, so much fun. Thank you for having me. And if you're in California, please come by. We'd love to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Pablo. Absolute pleasure.
All right, bye.